Thank you so much for that. So my name is Nagusset. I'm the executive director of the Native Women's Shelter. I'm from Lac La Ronge, Treaty 6. I was adopted by a Jewish family, and I've been living in Montreal since I'm 3, working at the Native Women's Shelter since 1999, and I love my job. It's the best job ever. We made these posters, and the women at the shelter helped make these posters, and it was a really good experience for everyone to get together, but it was a really sad experience that we have to do this. So we did this because we want to honor Haas Lightning Saddleback, who was 15 years old. I have a 15-year-old. And Jason West, who's 57, and Tammy Bateman, who was 39, and Danny Knife, who was 31, and Jack Pichet, who was 31, and Iggy, who was 31. And it's important to say their names, and then I hope that when people take tobacco and they put it in the fire, that you pray also for their family, who must be absolutely devastated. And I don't understand why this continues. I don't understand why it seems like it's open season on Indigenous people, and it's just fine to kill us, and no one's going to complain, and no one's going to make a fuss about it. And I find it so troubling that it literally keeps me up at night. And I give a lot of thanks to my staff, because when I want to organize something, they all come and help me out. And it's important that we do this, but it's important that this stops. Like, why aren't there rallies across Canada saying that this shouldn't happen? And I reached out to the Black community because in my experience doing the work that I do, I've always looked to the Black community for their leadership when it comes to discrimination and racism. And Dr. Dorothy Williams is someone who I got to work with for youth protection, because she was advocating on behalf of the Black children that were being put into white families. And I said, Dorothy, I want to be you. Show me how to be like you. And when, in the United States, George Floyd died, there was huge rallies, and I don't know how to do that. So I'm grateful for those that showed up, and I think there's a lot of work that the Black community and the Indigenous community can do together, because we face so many of the same issues, and if we come together, we can be stronger and we can learn from you. So that's it for me. I'm now going to introduce Ellen Gabriel.
Thank you everybody for coming out tonight and for your show of solidarity just by showing up. It's really important that people get involved in this purported democracy and understand the genocidal history of Canada and how it continues to oppress, it continues to steal our land, it continues to steal our children, and it continues to kill our people. The RCMP have a long history of killing Indigenous people for the economic benefit of the church, for the economic benefit of the British and of Canada. Those are our colonizers. And we have new colonizers with Quebec. And I was trying to think of what kind of words I would say tonight on this issue of police killing Black Indigenous people of color. And I first of all want to say and express my condolences to each of the family, because you can imagine how it is when you lose a loved one, how much anger you feel and how much hurt you feel. And so, as Nakasit and others have encouraged you, when you put down your tobacco afterwards, please think of those families and give them strength and love and light wherever they may be at this point in their lives. In researching, I was reading Kimberly Murray's, who is the special interlocutor for the buried, unmarked graves. Thousands and thousands of Indigenous children across this country are lying in unmarked graves, killed by the people they were supposed to be in their care. Killed because they were Indigenous. And the fact that that mentality has not gone away in 2024 is up to every one of us to make that change. We have not been taught, even was not taught in schools of the genocidal history of Canada. But I do know how school made me feel. School made me feel less than. And the dehumanization of Indigenous, Black, people of color, and especially now as we think of Palestine, the dehumanization of people is unacceptable. So I found this quote from Judith Butler, from her book, Frames of War. She said that our lives considered to be what Judith Butler describes as ungrievable. Ungrievable is a life, is one that cannot be mourned because it has never lived. That is, it has never counted as life at all. And grievable life is a valuable life, a person whose humanity is recognized, celebrated, and deemed worthy of protection. And as we think about those people, those innocent people, and I think also of Colton Boushie, who was killed unnecessarily. I think of Aname Akwash. I think of the women, the murdered and missing Indigenous women across this country who the RCMP get more money to investigate, but they actually do nothing. Because this is a government and all of its entities and authorities do not care about people of color. More so, they do not care about Indigenous people. Because they want every square inch of our land that we have left. I think I'll go over here. They want every square inch of land that we have left. They want everything about us to be erased. It's about the erasure. That's what dehumanization is about, is the erasure of the people's language, the erasure of our connection to the land, our culture, to our relatives. It is the dehumanization that justifies the killing of these 5 people and many thousands of others that have been killed at the hands of police. We give the police too much power. We do not supervise how they are trained. Does anybody here know the training that police get? Should we care? I think so. Because I think they're trained to hate Indigenous people. I think they're trained to hate Black and Indigenous people of color. I think they are trained to look at us as less than human. And until we start putting the curriculum, Canada's genocidal curriculum, and all of its root causes, we will continue to see our brothers and sisters being killed at the hands of police when it was totally avoidable. Their deaths was totally avoidable. The police are not mental health workers, that's true. And there are programs right across Canada to have a de-escalation of a mental health worker when there are situations like this. Because let's face it, how do you get over surviving genocide? How? We continue to see it being repeated. We continue to see an apathetic society that when it's convenient for them, they will take notice, and when it's not, they will go on shopping in the shopping malls. You vote 4 times, like once every 4 years, and think that's a democracy. That's not a democracy. You are handing your human rights over to people who could give, you know what. But I think what we should expect is not just more from the police, but more from the people that you vote for. Because it is them that has been resisting the positive changes that could happen for reconciliation with Indigenous people. Reconciliation is not up to us. That's up to you guys. When we say we want our land back, it's all up to you guys too, in a sense. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to have reconciliation with the first peoples of this land? This is our land. There may be buildings, there may be concrete sidewalks, there may be roads, but the land belongs to us. And that's what the government knows, and that's why they don't care if the police are still killing Indigenous peoples, and they will not do anything. We're going to what? Ask the police to investigate themselves? We're going to ask the government to investigate themselves? There are commissions, there are reports that talk about the solutions, and none of them have been implemented. We are still experiencing the same levels of racism that was there 500 years ago. And that we are looked at as either drunken Indians, welfare-grubbing Indians. You know, we are a strain on the people's society, on their taxes. Well, I can tell you that your taxes do not pay for the services that I and other Indigenous people receive. That's our money. And all the taxes that you pay are going into killing Indigenous people and Black Indigenous peoples of color. That's your tax dollars. Are you not concerned with how your money is being spent? Are you not concerned that more innocent people will be killed because nobody is doing anything? The police should be, as what Sven's read, they're there to provide a service and to protect. Instead, Indigenous people are afraid of the police. We do not trust the police. We trust less your government and the rhetoric that they use to say in public to placate people like yourselves. When does it stop? We know that the violations of the rules of law, international humanitarian law, have been broken. Every single humanitarian law has been broken. And that there is not a single state willing to step up to the plate to protect the human rights that's in their state. In fact, they are more in love with money than in love with the future generations and what we are passing on to them. They are more in love with what technology can provide, with what their investments will provide. And who do you think is standing in the way of those investments for resource extraction, for all kinds of development? It's Indigenous people that have been at the forefront of climate crisis. We have been at the forefront of standing up for the land, standing up for our rights, standing up for the people. I stand on really big shoulders of people before me who tried to get Canada's attention. They say, look, we're human beings. When you cut us, we bleed, right? If we cut you, you're going to bleed too. We're the same. We're the same, you and I. We're different colors. We're different hair colors. We're different bodies. But we're still human beings. And that's not taught to police. They are taught to look at only color. They declare that they don't do racial profiling, but we know better, right? We know that's not true. They lie to us all the time. Anything that comes out of the government's mouth is a lie. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police said we've spent enough money on Indigenous people on policing. This is not a frickin' issue about policing. I'm sorry. This is about taking the lives of 5 innocent people who had mental health problems or were just guilty of being Indigenous. This is about getting justice for them and their families. This is about putting the police in their place. You do not touch me. You do not touch my family. You do not touch my land. You do not come on our lands and protect the corporate interests who are stealing our lands and who are protected by your laws, your very laws. So unless you are serious about a revolution, as I've heard in the last year, when it comes to Palestine, we need a revolution. Palestine has awoken us all, but I think what is going on right now for Indigenous people is that we need you, every one of you, to help us get out of this cycle of genocide that many generations continue to feel its impacts, continue to try and stop. How are we going to stop guys with weapons? How are we going to stop the racism that continues to be the bane of our existence? Start teaching your children. Start implementing those recommendations. Any solution must be led by Indigenous people, not by the RCMP, not by people like Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Legault, but by Indigenous people who know what we need to protect ourselves. Because at the end of the day, we are all living together. And if our deaths don't mean anything, then that's a sad reflection on society. But if it does, you will work with us. You will work with people and organizations like Nakasit's Native Women's Shelter. You will work with the Black community to ensure that their children are protected. Because every one of us has a role to play. We have an obligation under our Constitution of Kayanarakoa. We have an obligation. I don't care about Canada's laws and what it says about private property. I'm going to go on private property and I'm going to protect our lands if I have to. But we need your help. And I've been saying this for 34 years. When are you guys going to help us? When are you guys going to stand up with us? Write your member of parliament, write your member of the National Assembly and say this is unacceptable. And do not take their rhetoric. Pressure them. Because we are all human beings. And I think that's what people need to take away from this. These are people who had lives and that were taken from them. So please, think about changing the curriculum in your schools. Think about supporting Indigenous organizations. And think about how police are trained and make changes to how they are trained. Because right now, they're just killers. As far as I'm concerned. They do not protect us. They are part of the problem, as Human Rights Watch has said. RCMP have been under scrutiny for a long time, but they're like the Teflon Dons, nothing sticks to them. Let's make this stick to them and make them accountable. So, Nyawa jitas kadahunsadat, Nyawa, thank you for listening to me. And I thank you to the organizers. Thank you for the fire, for the smudge, the tobacco, and for the song. Because that's who we are as Indigenous people. We are people of the land. So please don't forget that. Nyauko, Tani Kawanaka.